these communities play a central role in connecting conversation and identifying leadership that creates connections. The more the industry works together to solve the same problem, the better the industry is going to be, the more money the industry is going to make, the better service and products the industry is going to deliver. Everybody is going to win, in part because of the conversations that are aligning now, thanks to a digital meeting that we can have and things like this, that never really could take place with such ease before.
I'm Andrew Daniels.
I'm Mike Fiedel, and we're from InsurTech, Ohio.
And this is the future of insurance.
This episode is brought to you by Medallia, the market leader in customer and employee experience. Their award-winning SaaS platform, Medallia Experience Cloud, makes all your other applications customer and employee aware. Medallia uses proprietary AI and machine learning to reveal predictive insights that drive powerful business actions and outcomes. Leading insurers like Prudential and Zurich use Medallia to reduce churn, turn detractors into promoters, create in-the-moment cross-sell and upsell opportunities, and drive revenue-impacting business decisions. Learn more at Medallia.com. And the Future of Insurance book series, available exclusively from Amazon or at future-of-insurance.com.
Andrew Daniels and Michael Fiedel, thank you so much for joining me on the show, guys. It's great to get some time. I don't think I've actually gotten to talk to the two of you at once together, except on email, maybe.
Ooh.
So this is
You're in for a treat.
That's trouble, Brian.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, it's great to get some time with both of you at once. And as I told you, if you want to fight over answering questions, that's fine too. But maybe we can start with that. Is like, who wants to tell me a little bit about what the heck you guys are building with InsurTech Ohio? Ready? Fight.
Ooh. I'll fight you first, Michael. With InsurTech Ohio, we're really trying to facilitate this community that's been here for a very long time, and kind of bring it to light. So it really started as more of a networking mission for me as I transitioned back to Columbus. I had always lived here, but I was traveling a little bit with the innovation team at Allstate Insurance. And I came back to stay when, family choices kind of brought me back here. And I just started networking, and I had never really understood like the insurance landscape outside of a larger organization, let alone what was happening here in Columbus and, things that were headquartered here. And one thing led to another. Started talking with Ilya over at Bold Penguin, who had done some things earlier on, maybe 5 or 6 years ago with a small group, and with Chad over at Centric Consulting, and with Matt Armstead, who's running Horizon 2 Labs now, and somehow walked out of a meeting with Ilya with the keys to a large kind of email list, and here we are today. Introduced to Michael throughout that process through Chad, and lots of twists and turns along the way, but all coming back to how do we create a sustainable community that lasts more than 3 to 5 years, and how do we facilitate this innovation in the industry and highlight what's going on here too.
Yeah, Michael, I want to give you a space to add to that, but you guys know I have this like strange love affair with Columbus. I don't know why. I just so took to the city. It's a nice place. But for those who don't know, we hear insurance and we think, okay, it's Chicago, it's Hartford, it's New York. But then you go to Columbus and you get Nationwide there. And then you've got all these other fairly sizable carriers kind of in these like concentric circles going out around Columbus. And then you shift to Cincinnati and you've got Sinfin, you've got Great American. Like, you actually have a ton of pretty substantial insurance activity in the state. And then that's before you even talk about the VC community, the InsurTech community. You mentioned Ilya and Bold Penguin, you got Root, you've got a lot of startups on the carrier side and the provider side, the facilitator side, whatever, and some great investment communities as well. that I think people may not realize the heft of the industry or the scale of the industry, and the way that it's thriving in the state. So when I found out about you, I was excited, not just because I was all excited about Columbus in general, but that it was sort of speaking to what I had observed as, a guy from Boston, didn't really know much about the insurance community in Ohio, but then got to see it and was kind of blown away. So then see the community thriving and coming together stronger was really cool for me.
I mean, I'm not from Ohio. I'm a recent transplant by way of New York City, really. I was in Chicago for a couple of years as my wife and I. She's from the Midwest. We kind of tested out Chicago first and then just realized that we needed a little bit more room to breathe. And Columbus offered an opportunity for some more space. And so we were ready to leave the world of downtown living and moved to a suburb in Columbus. And just one shout out to the just general community outside of insurance. Just Columbus is a fantastic place to live, and the people in this city have a tremendous passion for various industries, insurance being one of the predominant ones. And coming from, I was born in Los Angeles, lived most of my life in New York City, and I felt tremendously welcomed by Columbus at large. From an insurance point of view, it's an incredible arena inside of Columbus, out in Cincinnati, in Cleveland. And there's, through, I think, a lot of the InsurTech companies, a growing sense of, on some level, partnership that Ohio as a whole is deserving of greater recognition for the impact that it plays on a national level. And the carriers that we have and that have been around for several years, long before InsurTech was a buzzword, know that and speak to that quite well. But if you look at the InsurTech companies that are being built in our state, it speaks volumes to the competition that our markets are having with the likes of Silicon Valley and New York City.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's an interesting story, Andrew, going back to like getting this email list. Very cool. But it's about community and about bringing people together to help it thrive. And, I was saying to you guys before we recorded, like this notion that what's this industry for? It's for putting people's lives back together at the worst moments. And one of the best ways to do that is working hand in hand. So when we talk about community, that's what that's about. And I mentioned to you guys how there's all these regional groups starting up or started up last year and maybe more on the horizon, but there seems to be this like camaraderie amongst them and kind of a borderlessness despite being sort of geographically planted. And maybe part of that was the pandemic, because like you couldn't have all your local meetups, so everything was virtual, so why keep the fences around who can participate? But there was definitely a really nice collective attitude towards the bigger picture. Maybe it goes back to the reason why we exist in the first place as an industry. So I kind of felt that right off the bat, that it's like we want to work together, not like, no, this is our area, you stay away, you go back to your part of the country. Did you feel that? I mean, representing one of the areas, did you feel that sort of support and camaraderie across, InsurTech New York and Hartford, and there's QC FinTech down in Charlotte, and like there's FinTech LA, InsurTech LA rather, like all these different groups that have been popping up or starting to really thrive.
Yeah, I think definitely. My earliest memory, I met David from InsurTech New York out at in Des Moines at the Global Insurance Accelerator event, and that's when I was kind of picking some things up, and I think Michael was soon to come on board. And we have conversations all the time, and with Stacy up in Hartford. And I think one of the most interesting parts about kind of the camaraderie or bringing all of these groups together and not feeling threatened by what they're doing in New York or Hartford. I think each community brings a different aspect to the table. Like they're very strong in one segment of the community, I think.
Yeah.
And I think for us, like what we've identified, we obviously have, large carriers based here and regional carriers based here, and the talent that supports those types of company at scale is really our strong suit here. So that's why you see a Root and a Bold Penguin popping up. Root from the standpoint of as it scales, it needs these types of resources that are not only insurance specific, but even more specific to very technical roles within the organization. And those are the type of people that live here and that work here. So if you can get your startup to that level, it really does accelerate things really well. So, I think partnership with, we did an event last year with InsurTech Connect and their global type thing. And because of the pandemic, those are relationships that helped us build things, I think, a little bit quicker and get our word out there too.
Yeah. For the world tour to have a stop in Ohio was awesome. And I appreciated that. That's actually, you guys may not know this. That world tour event was where I first got more insight on Branch and why I was like, I want them in my book. So yeah, there's a nice Ohio story to the new book anyway, but that was where that came from. And then I was like, how do I get through to Steve and Joe and convince them that they should share more about their story?
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's great. And those are the types of things that, like, in the short term and in the very short amount of time we've been working on this, it's hard for us to quantify that payoff, right? Like those are the things we want to happen. And we know if we do the right things and create this community that lasts a very long amount of time and has some sort of model that doesn't rely upon tons of funding coming in every year. Those are the types of things that are just going to happen organically.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't exist, if we don't do that world tour stop, like maybe you don't get that conversation or, that connection to them.
I'm curious, there's definitely a lot of activity on these regional or InsurTech communities last year, especially, obviously taking advantage of the fact that you can engage people virtually and spin these things up. Kind of InsurTech New York came out of the blue really, and built up a great presence really fast. You guys certainly came into strength. I hear the story started earlier, but a lot of strength came together in 2020. I'm curious why we need the communities. Like what's lacking? And this from a guy who is in an InsurTech community or InsurTech city. Like Boston has a good InsurTech foothold, but not a strong local community, actually. So I'm curious about your take on, like, why do the communities need to exist? What happens when we don't have them? Or what are we missing?
Andrew, I'll jump in there if you don't mind. What I would point at is the entire industry of insurance is, I think, absolutely going through this watershed moment where, as a whole, the industry is focusing on its own opportunities to improve in mass, and the conversation around how those changes or what those challenges are, and how changes are being made to take advantage of opportunities to improve the industry overall, is at an exceptional level. For those in insurance and those who have no idea what insurance is all about, I couldn't imagine a more exciting industry to be trying to build technology. And as we have in InsurTech Ohio talked a lot, thinking about the strategy behind how insurance is changing. It's really, that's where the opportunity lies. It's not about as much the technicalities of these changes and the software and the code that goes into them. It's about the ideas and the great questions that people are sharing and asking. And we're elevating these conversations on a national level. And I think these regional players like InsurTech Ohio InsurTech New York, InsurTech Hartford, are bringing a spotlight from a regional standpoint, to the players in our spaces that are participating on a national level, that are really shaking the ground. You think about a Root Insurance, who's now IPO'd, and the moves that they've made. I mean, their origin story starts with talking to carriers about ways in which carriers can improve. And most of those carriers said, this technology is too far in front of us. And so they just created their own insurance company to get that technology out the door, and have exploded onto the scene. Branch is backed by leadership that fundamentally wants to refocus and change where the industry is going, but at the same time bring it back to insurance's original goal of protecting people and building communities. So these communities play a central role in connecting conversation and identifying leadership that creates connections like the one that you have created with Steve Lacoste. We're trying to do that both within the players in Ohio alone, but also outside of Ohio, and elevating those leaders to try to get them to the next level, whatever that level is, whether they're trying to build something nationally or internationally. Yeah. The more the industry works together to solve the same problem, shades of gray, there's going to be different approaches. The better the industry is going to be, the more money the industry is going to make, the better service and products the industry is going to deliver. Everybody is going to win, in part because of the conversations that are aligning now, thanks to a digital meeting that we can have and things like this, that never really could take place with such ease before.
Yeah. Yep. I think there's like maybe three or four reasons why the community needs to exist in my mind. And I think the first one's selfish. Like, I want to be a part of that community. And what we found out is like, we might have to build it, more formally, to participate in the events. Like, I just want to talk about insurance with people. Like, I'm obsessed with the future of it and where it could go. And you can't start understanding where it could go unless you have conversations with others who are kind of knee deep in solving the current problems, or just going through the motions right now. So I think that's really important to me. I think what's been really cool, and another reason why it exists, is, there are some really forward-thinking carriers out there, and a lot of them exist in Ohio and in Columbus. Like, for example, Brent Hammer over at Grange Insurance, obviously doing a fantastic job attracting these early-stage startups, and using their solutions, kind of implementing those and just getting involved in the community. He's been very involved with what we're doing and extremely helpful. And I think the third one is around the segment of kind of this VC segment, obviously with Drive Capital here in town, and what they've done even this year, bringing a couple of InsurTechs, investing in them, setting up operations in Columbus, is pretty awesome. Like, they have a health InsurTech one, and I think at least two other InsurTechs coming to town. And that goes back to the talent that's here. But I think that you have to have that community built up to be able to attract those types of company and show them that you can tell them, right? Like, over and over, like, I can tell people, like, there's something going on here, and there's something that has been going on here. But when you can show them, like, hey, here's the community, and here's who's involved and who's active and who's sharing their time to give back to the community, I think that's really powerful in continuing to bring those types of companies here.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting point on how capital can play a hand in that, in creating more of that cohesion, and the cohesion leads to more support, higher levels of success. When you mention Drive, you got Beam Dental, who moved from Louisville up to Columbus. They're in the book too. So that was another, I guess I was trying to build something around Columbus with that, but that was to be closer to the capital, to be closer to the support that comes with it, to the ecosystem that's starting to thrive around that. And, you know, Louisville's a great city, but it doesn't have the same level of insurance growth and talent and kind of pulsating that Columbus is building up. So clearly, like, that's a huge support to what, you know, Fro and the team at Beam are trying to build, aside from cleaner teeth. So definitely, there's value to that community, and just like boots on the ground as a startup.
Well, and I think that's really, you know, as much as Drive attracts to the city from the capital standpoint, like that's our missing segment right now. Like we attract outside investment from, you know, carriers investing into these startups like American Family, into Bold Penguin. Yeah. But we need to attract more VC dollars, you know, coming out of Columbus into Columbus or Ohio-based startups as well. That's our missing segment. I mean, that's what, you know, the guys in New York have more of that ecosystem built out just naturally in the fintech and insurtech space. And obviously on the West Coast in LA and, you know, over there, they have that built out. And even in Denver, they've got kind of the startup segment build out a little bit too. So it's just, you know, it's something that we're aware of and something that we're really interested in building up that segment for our area.
Yeah, Denver's an interesting one to watch. And the Bay Area, maybe it doesn't need someone to try to bring the community together, but that's one where it's like there is a ton of activity, obviously a lot of investment dollars as well. But yeah, where's the cohesive insurtech community that's kind of come to the front there? I guess one of the things I'm curious about with your perspective, because you see as much variation in what people are working on and where they are in their life cycle, and on the carrier side, both the startups and the established carriers, what kinds of things do you guys think are coming down the road for us, you know, in the next 18 months or whatever, but then thinking a little bit longer is like, what are some of the shifts that we see coming in the industry? And I will caveat that with, it's okay if you're wrong. I had a great conversation with Kirby about his predictions of the original ITC. And he was like, I got this one wrong. Here's what I said. You know, like, it's okay. But yeah, I'm just curious, you know, given the buzz that you guys are in the midst of, what kinds of themes do you think are coming to the forefront?
Yeah, I'll jump in. You know, for me, I think it's relative to especially the community that, or the types of startups that we're seeing come to our community or being, you know, brought to our community. And this is something I had up on my whiteboard like 6 months ago, so I'm not making it up. I said like 2021, 2022, like obviously others are talking about this too. It's like the year of distribution through embedded insurance and new niche companies, insurance carriers being spun up, you know, based off of these very unique brands that are targeted to a specific demographic. And obviously you've seen that with Root and with Branch. And you see it with others that are coming out right now. But I think it's all about that. It's hyper focused on a certain demographic with your branding and your messaging and maybe a unique underwriting model. And then it's like, how do you partner with other either marketplaces or other online services to embed the insurance at the time of transaction? And I think like the good news is the industry is so massive and there's so many very unique demographic sets that there's still opportunity. Like you're seeing these little ones pop up everywhere, and there's still enough, you know, market size there to make a run, just being very targeted in your policyholder.
Yeah.
In my outside of InsurTech Ohio, I live and breathe the day-to-day digitization of commercial lines within property and casualty, and so I think the digitization of almost every transaction is upon us, and every carrier is searching for a way to be accessible in some sort of digital format through either multiple partners or their own, likely as well as their own platform. And there is an arms race to be as accessible across every digital channel, no matter what that channel is. I shouldn't maybe say it quite that broadly, but there's definitely an arms race to be accessible in every digital property that's trying to aggregate and open up a buying decision from a consumer point of view or an agent point of view. So that experience, that digital experience, is thriving right now in terms of its own evolution and the improvements that are being made to allow not just for accessibility on price, but also accessibility on options, and how the product and service around insurance can be improved through these digital experiences, not just turning around a quote that much faster. That's the area that I definitely focus on personally the most, and that ship has sailed. If you're not driving down that road and you're still working within an email and PDF driven workflow, and you don't see that changing quickly, then you're falling behind.
Yeah. Well, so I was going to agree with you on the strength of the statement. I think it's okay whether everyone is participating in the arms race or in the same way is a different question, but maybe that's the question is there a place for carriers who are holding back on some of those changes or some of those adoptions? Because I talked to some who are like, this is the way we've done things. This is our system. It's old, but it works. And so we're sticking with that. And our policyholders like us. Is there a place for carriers like that, or is there a place for now?
I'll answer that question by also pointing out my hesitation was also around commoditization. I think that that's an interesting challenge that the industry is facing, and certain pieces of the buying process are easier to point at than others.
Sure.
The price can be an overwhelming part naturally of the purchasing decision for obvious reasons. And so I think carriers are naturally weary of simply flinging around their price and not being able, clearly they have to protect their risk as well, right? They cannot allow anyone to simply come into a program and decimate their book of business. And that's where the most interesting challenges are occurring in terms of how to improve the product by being able to tell people, whether you're a business or an individual, this is who I'm looking for in this program. And if you fit these guidelines, you're going to get a great price from me. If you don't fit these guidelines, you're going to get a weaker price. And I'm cool telling you that. Yeah. I'm cool if you see my price a little higher than my competitors because you don't fit the profile that I want. And I mean, if you talk to people who've been in insurance a long time, especially over a pint, that's the London part of me that I love.
You mean like a pint of ice cream?
Like a pint of ice cream. Yes. They'll talk about the fact that insurance essentially comes down to, from a buying standpoint, from a carrier point of view, you're gambling on some level. That's not really the heartfelt way of looking at it, but you're taking broad strokes of risk type and you're saying, I'm going to bet on this risk and I can win on this risk. And at the end of the day, that's how the industry survives, is you have to be able to gamble right.
Yeah.
And so it's not just being able to fling the price, it's being able to choose the customers that you want to work with and making sure that hopefully they all have an option or a whole portfolio of options. But I just wanted to point out that the hesitation is you can't just be out there looking to get every customer you can get your hands on. And the most interesting challenges are being solved around how to do that properly.
Yeah. Maybe that's part of the problem is people presume the internet means indiscriminate demand or supply of customers, if you will. Like, it's not like your funnel suddenly becomes blind and inept unless that's how you're transacting. Once you go digital, like, you then have other options available to you to know more about the makeup of your funnel and those prospects. And so whether you want to play in that side of it too, like maybe you have to. You can't just be like, oh yeah, well, we'll just get quotes from these guys and whatever comes in comes in. that's like an old school approach to a completely different way of doing business.
Yeah.
And maybe those two just don't marry up.
Andrew, I'll make one more point and then I'll pass it to you. I'd say that the hesitation that I see from carriers isn't on the idea that they need to innovate. They all, for the most part, have a CIO or a CTO in combination, and they are attending ITC and going to everything and listening to everything. I think the main root issue is they want to build technology, but they don't want to challenge their actuarial model. They want to build digital around a broken workflow, about the wrong data. You have to rethink everything from the ground up in order to compete at this point. It's not just about being accessible on a digital platform.
That's really well said.
Well, Michael, that was a good segue into I was holding a prediction back because it just popped in my mind, as you said, innovation in carriers. I think my prediction over the next 18 months in that space, you'll see the carriers kind of continue to run through their innovation cycles of, stand up innovation team, start investing into startups somehow, strategic partnerships, and then you'll see at the probably the most mature level, companies like Progressive and American Family, who are starting to build like actual studios that go off, and most of them are tackling like building adjacent technologies out. So things that they then can embed their insurance products into. It's really interesting to see if those continue to, if they pump anything out that gains later stage investment. Or if if that continues to exist as well. Like I'm wondering if it's another phase, or what kind of proof points they can pump out in the next 18 months that'll say like, hey, this is really interesting. We have to start attracting like a new type of people to these InsurTech studios that we're building. Because one thing they do have is they have the capital to do things like that. If they can bring in the right talent who understand, what types of things need to be done at an early stage for those companies. So I'm excited to watch that. I guess that's not a prediction, Bryan. That's just like what Andrew's excited to watch for.
I think you're right that they have a capital, but there's a nuance to the capital at an insurer versus a VC or hedge fund or PE firm or whatever. Certainly the stock market is time. Because insurance is built on the tail, right? That's how we've always made our money, is how long we can sit on the money that we have so that it plays out. And the longer you get, the better, because you can invest it longer and hopefully then release it. So I've always said it's really interesting. It's really easy for a smart person to say like, oh, we're a long tail carrier, but I understand the difference between long and short tail, so we can do short tail lines. But then they get into it and they freak out when they see like the payouts going out and the reserves dwindling. It's like, because it's a 12 to 18 month tail, not a 3 to 5 year tail. So it doesn't mean you're going to have another 2.5, 3 years of this. Like this is when it's playing out, or vice versa, where, you get short tail experience that's working in a long tail line, and they get really like 3 years on and it's been quiet, and all of a sudden there's payouts because that's the nature of the line, and they get really uncomfortable and want to shut it down because it was like, oh, we've had this ticking time bomb that we never knew about. So even though they're smart and they can understand long versus short tail, I feel like investment dollars are probably similar. And so if a carrier is wired to think like things need to sit and play out, and as they play out, that's when the value is created, versus an investor who, VCs have timing for their funds, and so they're, maybe there's a specific time they're looking for, but generally on the investment side, we put money in, we expect a return without having to wait forever for it. So maybe there's an ability for a carrier investor to be more patient with the capital, and let the strategy of it pay out over time, versus just like, we need our multiple within this time frame or it's worthless.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Like I'm hoping that kind of this first wave of InsurTechs that came through now having exited, can kind of start to show that and what the path looks like. And, maybe those will start being proof points for, being a little bit more patient with the money if they know what the payoff is. But, maybe not, like maybe it's just like, it's too foreign and that's fine. Like that's why there's other segments of the industry, right?
Yeah.
That's why that exists. So
it's really interesting how it mirrors insurance is different, but maybe not. Like you look at the dot-com bubble burst, and there's been this huge influx of investment in InsurTech right now. There was in 98, 99, and then a lot of those companies that existed in 99 don't exist today. The few that do, like Amazon, obviously things played out incredibly well there, but the vast majority don't exist. Maybe we're still in the sort of like 1.0-ish first generation of big names that need to prove out. And it does feel like some of the newer InsurTechs are built different, that there's something different in their DNA and their approach, in their maybe even just how they're structuring their economics. That's just going to play out differently. I kind of felt that as I was working on the book. It's like, this is almost like a new class of students going through that are just like, they grew up to, it's like millennials versus Gen X, like they're just different. And so there's something different in the makeup. Are you guys seeing any of that at all? That like, there's a sort of like next generation or generations to the startups?
I definitely think so. Like, I think you've highlighted that one earlier in Branch. Like, I see that as more of a second generation kind of coming in after learning from the first wave of these guys. Absolutely. Like, that's very wild that you would bring that up, because that's how I see that.
Cool.
For sure.
Michael, do you think I'm right also?
I think that it's clearly
disagree with him, just to disagree.
You're wrong. I think that there's a human nature to trial and error that at scale is inevitable, and so we're absolutely destined to rinse and repeat a similar innovation model that just the internet at large experienced in the first place.
Yeah.
I think pointing at Branch is a fantastic example of a company that has an expectation of changing the model from the ground up. It's interesting. Nobody how the industry potentially evolves in a similar, to build a company like an Amazon or Google is an interesting idea, especially in light of insurance is about protecting people and things. And Amazon is the mothership provider of all things. And one of the very exciting places that the industry is going is being able to protect the minute, the one product you buy, the one hour that you use your car. And the closer insurance can align with the things you're buying or the things you're doing on a micro basis, the more a player like Amazon is in an incredible position to play a key role in dictating how insurance can be applied. So it's kind of a race between, I think, the industry as a whole and the players that are up and coming, entrepreneurially speaking. Those InsurTech companies that are now the second generation and able to start from scratch and really rewrite the model, and how they can dominate quickly the hearts and minds of consumers, while Amazon and Google continue to invest and learn quickly more and more how they can surround and participate in the industry, which I'm not 100% familiar with, but you can see that they're playing, they're using money. They're slinging capital around at the very least, and they're learning.
Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting. I feel like that's a whole conversation going down that path. But we got to wrap things up. Do you guys have any kind of parting thoughts of wisdom for either the startups out there or the person who's who's thinking about something and they're like, I've got this idea. I don't know if it's a thing or if I could make it happen. I don't know if I could leave my job, or, when I get out of school, I have to get a job. So like, what kind of guidance would you give people based on what you're seeing that maybe bring some clarity to that path forward, or a bit of inspiration for how they could? Or maybe it's stay the heck away, but I'm guessing it's not.
Stay out. No, not at all. I mean, I think from the startup perspective, like get involved in your local community, right? Like that, that I don't know, just through the conversations that we've had over time and with startups, it's like everyone's just, trying to find a way to give back to that community. And, however active you are kind of dictates how much that pays off in the end. So, getting involved in the grassroots, I had talked to some people who were doing some stuff down in Austin, and I think in a couple of other cities, maybe Philadelphia, and just like, if you're thinking about starting a community, reach out. Like Michael and I have tons of learnings of what to do and what not to do, probably more of what not to do, but hopefully that helps. And then I think from like an entrepreneurial standpoint, like that's where I love to focus on, is like, don't be afraid to talk about your idea with others. Because guess what? Like it is all about the execution of that idea or concept at the simplified form. So, talking about it with experts or with those who have gone through it before is really important. And if you realize that it's a big opportunity and you have the right conversations and the right connections behind you in community, I think that's the most important part. Is you have to have these relationships up front, and you have to be very targeted about what kinds of relationships you have to pull something like that off. So I would encourage, those types of people, like if you're in Ohio or if you're in the country, like reach out to us. Like I'm happy to help. I've seen people do it well and people not do it well. And hopefully I'm brave enough to tell you, like, stop working on that if I think you should stop working on it. But yeah, like, don't be afraid to talk about and start vetting that idea. But Michael, what about you?
I think three things come to mind. One, great advice, regardless of industry, was told to me by someone I went to with an idea in New York. And they told me, don't hoard your idea. Don't, like you said, Andrew, you nailed it. Don't protect the idea as if you're the only one thinking it, and you got to keep it really quiet. Those that win based on speed and passion. You've got to do it. That's where you win. You've got to take it every step of the way to get there. If you've got a great idea, the more you talk about it, the more you put it at the forefront of your mentality. This is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to tell people I'm going to do. I promise the more successful you're going to be at it. It's not because you got a patent. None of these ideas, for the most part, that I'm aware of, have any sort of real proprietary strategy in play. They are winning because they are doing and they're making it happen. In part, one of the reasons why they're doing it is because I can't think of a single, especially successful InsurTech company, supercharged, that doesn't have a co-founder relationship. I can't think of one that really, above all else, was a single-handed effort. If not multiple, like 3 or 4 co-founders in a lot of these situations, but always, if I'm not mistaken, at least 2. Yeah. So if you are solo and you've got a good idea, especially if you've got some maybe early industry experience, a couple years in, you think there's a good reason why insurance can improve, find someone who's as passionate and has a complementary piece of experience, maybe from a technical standpoint, maybe from an underwriting standpoint, if you're more on the sales side. That's point 2. And then 3, communities like the one that we're building with InsurTech Ohio is chock full of leaders who have been in the industry for 30 plus years and are semi-retired, and they love to talk about new ideas and have incredible relationships to capital. So if you've got an idea, find a co-founder if you haven't found that individual already, and start going to community events virtually or otherwise and find people who have industry experience. They are eager to connect and talk about new ideas.
I think that's great. And you guys really have the same ultimate point about not being insular. Engage, like talk to other people, work the community, work your network, work it for the sake of your idea, not to get something, right? So for the passion of what you're trying to build, there are people out there who can support you, who can inspire you, who can help guide you when maybe where you're going needs some reining in or redirection, so that you have a better chance of success or join in. I mean, that's how Steve and Joe got together. Is they had a relationship, they knew each other. Their companies have worked together a few times, and Steve called Joe for guidance on a technical co-founder, not expecting Joe to ever say like, yeah, me.
Yeah.
But that's what he'd hoped for, but he didn't expect it. So you never know what comes of it. And I was looking at, I've got the case list just off camera. And I was looking at it. I was like, yeah, there is not a single of those 9 companies. There's not a single one that's one person. There's several that are 3 or more, actually.
Yep.
Usually 2 or 3 though. And there's a nice complementary aspect to the skill set, to the intentions, to what they're each bringing, so that they can counterbalance and check and round out. But none of that comes if you're just you.
Yep.
And don't want to talk to people about it.
Yep.
Amen.
100%.
Cool. Andrew, were you about to add something?
Nope, you're on track. That was perfect.
Good, because I was going to close it up and I didn't want to cut you off. So thank you both. It was really good. I was hoping you would like step on each other's toes and fight more, but it's just not.
Never.
We'll have you back on so you can argue.
Yeah, we'll work on it. Yeah.
Thank you guys for the time, and honestly for building what you're building. I really, I mean, you know this from like the first time we talked, like I firmly believe in these communities. I think they're super necessary for the sake of building up more partnership, more community, more discussion in the industry, because that's the only way you really get to this place of like, let's do better at putting people's lives back together, which is a pretty important mission when you really boil it down and think about why insurance exists. So thank you guys for building what you're building.
And thank you, Bryan, for doing what you do.
It's lots of thanks all around.
Absolutely.
All right, guys. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Bryan.
Thank you. Thanks, Bryan.
Thank you to Andrew and to Michael for coming on the show. They're great guys. We had a lot of fun making that episode, and really interesting conversation about what's going on in Ohio, but also kind of thinking about the industry more broadly and how we can help foster kind of change and growth and investment and future that we can have in this industry. And of course, their focus being on the state of Ohio, but helping more broadly with the industry at large and partnering with other InsurTech communities and the greater InsurTech movement that's going on out there. So love what they're doing. If you haven't checked out their site to learn more about what they're doing, about the events they have going on, the programming they put out, the content they put out, you should definitely do that. It's InsurTechOH.io. Get it? Like you spell Ohio, OHIO, and the .io. So it's a very clever name. I love that. You can go learn more about them there. And of course, I will link to that in the show notes, so you can just click and go straight over to learn more about InsurTech Ohio. Thank you again to Andrew and to Michael for being on the show. And honestly, they've given me tons of support on my journey, so I appreciate them more broadly. And it's just good to get to sit down with the two of them together. Thank you to Medallia for sponsoring this episode so I could bring Andrew and Michael's thoughts to all of you. And a reminder, they appear in my new book, The Future of Insurance, Volume 2. So you should pick it up and hear some more thoughts about this whole InsurTech movement that's going on and how Andrew and Michael and others in the space are thinking about it, and the case stories of some very interesting companies, including a couple of local Ohio companies that Andrew and Michael know really well. Are in the book, so you can find out more about all of that at future-of-insurance.com. And while you're there, there's a link to the podcast that you can share with your friends. So you'll see that podcast link. Tell people in the industry about it so they can hop on and listen to more inspiring content from great leaders and thought leaders like Andrew and Michael
in this industry so we can all do better, move forward, and stand by our customers as they wish that we would in the ways that they want us to. All right, with that, I will let you go. I'm looking forward to bringing another great episode to you guys soon, so make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss that. And I will talk to you next time. Thank you.